Double Page Spread is brought to you by DCBS, the Discount Comic Book Service. You know, whenever you're looking for any of those really cool variant covers or different things that maybe your local comic shop just doesn't carry, always go check out DCBS because they have a wide assortment of limited edition things and, graphic novels and trade paperbacks at tremendous discounts. So go check out dcbservice.com. As well as go check out our friends at Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. In addition to making all their essential oil perfumes, their decadent fragrances, they also do a lot of good. So they have a new essential oil called National Emergency, and the benefits of that go to the American Civil Liberties Union. So go help them out, help a good cause. Also, they do a lot of t-shirts and things related to their perfume labels and the artwork that they have. Like they have a new one called Snow Moon. So check those out too, blackphoenixalchemylab.com. And if you're in the market for some t-shirts or some cool merchandise, go to Threadless and check out the Double Page Spread store where you can get our cool little Cappy logo and the other logos designed by Tom Kelly, all on an array, like notebooks, stickers, whatever you want. You can go check that out and then send me some feedback about it. Drop us a line at Twitter at DoublePGSpread, or I'm on Facebook as Wendy Freeman, or doublepagespread@gmail.com. I would love to hear some questions or feedback or anything. I love you guys. Have a great day. Welcome back to Double Page Spread, and I'm your host, Miss Wendy Freeman. Tonight I am joined by a man with a very exciting new project, Mr. John Horsley.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. Yes, we've had a hell of a time getting this together. Between,
right.
All the weather and all the problems. So is it snowing out there?
It's not snowing right now, no, but I just had to leave for the first time in like a week and a half, and while the main roads are clear, my driveway was very much a trick to get down. I kind of went down it sideways, but I made it home safely.
Yeah, well, good, because it's been like a sheet of ice in Chicago for the past week.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's colder there than it is here, but, we're not used to it here, so.
Right, you're in the Pacific Northwest, or are you Portland or something?
I'm outside of Seattle.
Oh, okay. Same place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very hilly here, so everywhere you go when it gets freezes, it's very dangerous because there's just hills everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're just sliding down.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, today was fine. It's getting warmer, but it's supposed to snow again tonight, I think, so we'll see. I haven't been to work in like 2 weeks because of one, getting sick, and two, the snow now, so.
Well, so now let's talk about the work you are doing that we do want to talk about.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of a hot Kickstarter for a book called the Eynes Anthology.
That is correct. Yeah, it's we're in that middle part now where it's like we're doing good. We're at 68%, but we're not like the hot thing new on Kickstarter. We're not the ending thing. So we're in that middle section right now, which is cool,
And Eynes is spelled EYNES for people out there who are just listening to this and.
Yeah.
Need to look this
up. It's a weird name, I know, but there's an interesting story about why I chose that. But
please tell me.
So I have a family man. I'm a married guy for 12 years. I have 5 kids, and I wanted to tell us I have some like social anxiety issues that I was dealing with a couple years ago, and it's pretty much under control now. But it was getting pretty bad a couple years ago, and I thought of a way to kind of deal with that would be to write about it, to write a story about it. But I wanted to base it like in the future, so I started writing a story that I just aptly named Sci-Fi Anxiety Story. That I haven't given, just that's what it was called.
If you called it that, like that would be huge. I'd buy it. Everybody'd buy it.
I thought about just leaving it at that too, but I mean that turned into the Eynes Anthology in some degrees. Because what happened is I created these characters, and I created them basically directly based upon myself, my wife, and my 5 kids. So I wanted to basically tell the story about this guy in the future on an off planet dealing with his anxiety with all this sci-fi elements as well. But I wanted the character, selfishly, I wanted the character to have some like resemblance of like my name. And my legal name is the letter J, and my legal middle name is the letter N. So in high school, I went by JN. So I decided to name the character J. Eynes. So it's kind of like JN, but a little different. And then when I went to create this horror anthology, that sci-fi story was kind of sitting stagnant. I just kind of took the last name and took it over to this one to make it the Eynes Anthology.
So your legal name is just an initial?
Yeah, it is. It makes it very difficult on bank forms. I'm fighting my bank right now that I've been with for the last 20 years because they won't let me add a new account to my account because I don't have a name. Like, it's my name. You've had it for 20 years. What is going on here? Yeah, it's very frustrating.
John, you've had to like make your name John?
I had to make my name longer to make it easier for people at work. Yeah. I mean, it's fun. I love my name. I love having the initials, but it does make it easier, like in conversation, like talking to people and meeting people or at work, to just go by John, because I do a lot of like partner calls my day job. So if I went by J, just the letter J, I would be explaining it on every single call, and I didn't want to do that.
I mean, people could just assume your name is like J-A-Y, J.
Yeah, but I wouldn't see me. I wouldn't go by J-A-Y. I would just have the letter J. People would always ask me, "Oh, what's J mean? What's J mean?" I got tired of that. And when I met my wife, so my wife is wonderful, right? We met working together at a bowling alley, 13 years ago, and she, I went by J, just the letter J then, and we started hanging out. She was calling me Jay. We went to my parents' house, and I introduced my parents, and my parents have always called me Johnny. And she heard that, and she goes, "Oh, you have another name that's not a fake letter? I'm going to call you that instead." So then from that point forward, I got stuck with the name Jay. I mean, stuck. It's fine. I don't mind it. I like it. But from that point forward, I was John from then on.
As soon as your wife decides something, that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's how it goes, right? Mm-hmm. She's a smart lady, so I trust her.
Good. I'm glad. I mean, she's got to be smart. She's juggling all those kids.
I mean, yeah, we had 5 kids, and she took, while before she got a job again last year, she was taking care of them all while I was working, so it was great.
Are they all singles? Or do you have twins or multiples or anything?
All singles. Nope. We have a 16-year-old, almost 13-year-old, an almost 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Oh wow, that's a big age range. That's awesome.
Yeah, I tell the joke. I wanted 3 kids. She wanted 4 kids. We had 5 kids, so nobody's happy. Got to find the happy medium of where nobody gets what they want. But it's great. I love having kids. I always wanted a big family, and so did she. So.
Well, that's sweet. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you.
I'm happy for me too.
A stable guy. You seem like somebody I want to be a dad.
Stable-ish. I mean, I am writing a horror anthology, so I mean, I don't know how stable that is, but.
So let's go back. Let's talk about the actual work. All right. So tell me the pitch of the Eynes Anthology.
So the pitch is, and I'll say this, I'll preface this by saying this is the quick pitch, but it's not going to be quick, so just bear with me. The quick pitch is, there's a family called the Eynes that have an affliction, an affinity to, and a connection with the monsters, the supernatural, the occult, and the things that go bump in the night throughout history and throughout time. Neither the monsters nor the Eynes understand why this connection is there. It's just that they both have a connection to each other. The monsters are drawn to them, and they're drawn to the monsters of the world. Now, this book 1, which is book 1 of 4 books total, we have 4 books planned out. This is just book 1. In this book, you learn the world of the Eynes, and it tells you stories from the year 1100 all the way out to 2025. So you have about 1,000-year span of stories, and the idea is each short story you're reading gives you a snippet in time of the Eynes family dealing with something of the occult or a monster of some kind. Now, they're not all the same kind of horror stories. Not all of them are like, oh my god, that was scary. A lot of them make you think. A lot of them are more visceral in your head and go, oh, that was really messed up kind of stuff. And our idea is this first book is your introductory into the world to get you to understand what can happen in this world with these characters, because one of the most important things to me when I created this series was I didn't want everything to be black and white. So you learn real quickly in this book that not all the Eynes are bad or good, and not all the monsters are bad. Because in the real world, nothing's black and white, So that's kind of the pitch. And now we do have an overarching story throughout book 1. So if you read book 1, you can get multiple stories, right? You get each individual story, and there's 9 individual stories. And there's a 10th story that ties all 9 of them together. And then each book will have that 10th story that ties all the other stories together. And then all 4 books together will tell one bigger story.
Oh, so you need a wraparound.
Yeah. There's a wraparound for each, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now, what eras do they take place? Do you have any war stories?
I do. We have a World War I story that takes place in Gallipoli that deals with they're not technically zombies, but they're zombies.
Okay, I'm into that.
Yeah, that one's fantastic too. So it's written by Travis Webb, and it's drawn or penciled by Greg Warrenchak out of Canada. I did the inks on that, and then J.W. Sims, who did the colors for Broke Down and Four Dead Bodies, is doing the colors on that one. And we actually have a print by Ron Randall for that story too.
Right, I love Ron Randall. I love Trekker. He's a really good guy. I love that guy.
Yeah, Ron's awesome. He's become a friend of mine and my co-host, my podcast, and over the last couple of years because we just did some interviews with him on our show promoting Trekker, and he's been such a great guy.
Yeah, he's very supportive. He just seems like somebody you'd want to be your mentor in life, you know?
Exactly. Him and Carl Kessel both have become. I was a big fan of Carl Kessel's work growing up on Superboy and on Harley Quinn, and now I'm quasi friends with him. Where I talk to him at cons and I message him on we're Facebook friends, and I see his family and his kids. We talk about life and stuff. It's cool to have that relationship with somebody who you respected their work, and now it's like, oh, now we're quote unquote kind of peers because we both have books out,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just did an interview with him that's coming up soon too, and yeah, he's a good person,
Yeah.
And I love that.
Carl's great.
Yeah, it warms your heart so much to know that like these people that you've seen all your life, it's like in Chicago, like when I moved here. I'd run into like Jill Thompson at parties or something. I'd be like, "Holy crap! What a like she's."
I love your Sandman work.
Right, exactly. Like, I've loved you since I was a teenager, and now I find out that you're just like a normal person and you're really cool. It's so
yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. I love that. I love hearing these things. I want to hear about. So tell me about your comic writing process. Like, how did you start, and how did you evolve? As a self-taught, like you said, you're kind of self-taught as a comic writer.
So, sheer will and determination to want to do it. So, I've been reading comics. I learned how to read from comic books. Like, I wasn't reading as a kid, and my dad was like, "Screw it, buy comic books, see if that works." And my mom reluctantly said yes. And my dad came home and gave me a stack of Batman and Wolverine comics, or I think it was X-Men and Batman. And I just dug into them and like, oh my god, these are amazing. Not only, and I felt like I was cheating. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm reading this 22-page book or this 100-page graphic novel, but really it's a bunch of pictures, so I'm cheating. I'm reading this is faster, but really I was reading, and that was the point. And I got addicted to it to where I started spending all of my allowance money. I started like doing extra chores to go to the store and buy more comic books, and like real soon I had like this big, boxes of Wolverines and Batmans and Supermans and X-Men's and anything I could get my hands on. And back in the 90s, Costco did these like 25 pack grab bags of comics for like $10 in the store. And every time we went, I'd beg my parents to buy me any one of them. I didn't care. Just buy me one of them, and I'll read everything that was in it. So I started reading through comic books, and then through that I discovered actual novels and reading books too. But that also ignited my will and want to draw more too, because I've always been drawing. But once I had those comic books and seeing like those dynamic poses and these people, these superheroes and all these like fantastical things, I was like, oh, I want to draw this too. So I started drawing like Wolverine pictures and Batman and Superman pictures. And then I found my dad's old collection of like the Eerie Illustrated or Eerie magazines and Creeper magazines and the Epic Illustrated and stuff like that. I was like, oh, here's some horrors. Here's some like stuff I probably shouldn't be reading at 12 years old. And, I love this. This is great. Who's this Frank Frazetta guy, and who's this, all these other guys, Bernie Wrightson, what, and getting into this like more detailed, more adult type fiction stuff. And then with that, when I was about 14 or 15, somewhere around there, my nephew, who was the same age as me, him and I decided we were going to start the world's greatest comic book company called J&J Comics, and we started writing and drawing these stupid ass comics about like Beltman and like Static Shock and Wolfman, and they were just, Beltman's powers was he was a guy trapped inside of a giant belt that wrapped around his body, and he could like throw the belt at people. And like Wolfman was the guy who was a wolf and a man. He had no powers. I mean, it made no sense, right? But to 14-year-old me, it was fantastic. And we were going to change the world.
Would he use his belt as a whip?
Basically, he was like, it was just a guy, and like the belt just wrapped around his whole entire body, and he would like push his hand out, and the belt would like fly out of his hand and smack people. I mean, it was completely ridiculous. Like Static Shock, like walked with his feet flat on the ground to build up electricity shocks and shock people. I mean, it made no sense, but we thought it was hilarious, And we were going to change the world with comics, and we both decided that we were terrible at them. And I just kept writing throughout high school, and I took creative writing classes, and I was that kid in high school that was a smartass when I did stuff. So like the teacher would give us a project to like say write a story of the day in the life of. So what I did is I wrote a story about my character I created named Bob, and it was called Bob of Day in Life A. So I just took the words and all mixed them all around, And it was just this crazy, stupid story about stuff that could never actually happen. Then I just kept writing and kept writing and kept writing. And then come about 2003, I was like, I like comic books. I've always wanted to work in comic books. Let's try writing some comic books. So I started writing my first comic book, like in script form. I looked up I looked up like a script, and then I looked at one script. And, oh, I can do that. They can, I know more than I do because at 21 you know everything, right? And I wrote a script for my first comic, which was called Y2 Christ, which was about a character who turned into a superhero named Y2 Christ, who fought totally nude and fought this ridiculous supervillain named Kapowie. And all the characters were based off of my friends because I had no concept of originality at the time, so I was just making off my friends. And I wrote the whole first 20, I think I wrote 28-page story. I started drawing it. I drew 12 pages, and then I got to the 12th page, and I was like, yeah, this is garbage. No one's going to read this. No one's going to like this. This is terrible. And I had my friend reading. He was like, yeah, this is pretty bad. And I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So but then I turned, that's when I discovered webcomics. And I was like, oh, you can post daily jokes online and people like this stuff. I can do that. I'm a funny guy, I think. So I turned that into a series called Y2 Christ Light, because the idea was I'll take the same characters, take out the superheroes, called the light version, which was, again, 21, 22 on me thinking I was clever. And I put that online, did that for 16 years, created 11 total webcomics that I would do in various genres and various styles, where I'd both write and draw or just write them, somebody else would draw them. Did that until 2016, I think it was, so 13 years. And through that whole time, I did some short stories here and there. I'd work on some short stories with both in prose form as well as in script form, kind of refine my script writing techniques. I kind of decided that in 2005, I started writing scripts for real. And I decided that I wanted to write scripts in a certain way, because the way I saw it is I saw things online, people writing scripts, they would do it with very loosey-goosey, oh, this stuff happens on this page, here's some dialogue kind of stuff. And then people who'd write more detailed stuff. I decided that I was going to write scripts for myself. If I was going to draw this page, I want the script to reflect what I want to draw. So my scripts became extremely detailed. So if you look at the script for some of the stories in this book, the 4-page story in the beginning of this book called Some Days I wrote, and it's a 4-page comic script, but the script itself is 12 pages. Because it's just every panel I detailed out, okay, this is what I want to see. This is the angle I want to have it as. This is the panel layout that I'm thinking of. This is, the color scheme. I kind of go into way, way too much detail than a writer probably should on a script, but that was because I was writing it for me to draw at the time. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I didn't draw that script. I ended up having my friend Rick Bugby draw out of Michigan. He did an amazing job. And but he actually liked the fact that I was so detailed, because he's like, oh, you tell me exactly what you want. This makes it easier for me. I'm like, okay, cool. But I know working with other artists, some artists like it to be more loose. I just wrote a script for Drew Moss, who is doing a story in book 2 of this series, and it's very much a lot looser. It's basically, I give there's panel layouts, there's not layouts, there's panel numbering and brief descriptions, but there's no dialogue yet. I told him, because I gave him a very loose, here's what I want, here's what I'm seeing on the page, and then I trust you because you want to make it however you want to make it. I'll add dialogue in. I'll do it the Stan Lee way. I know what they're going to say, but I just didn't write it out in the script yet, because it didn't matter for this script, right? This script was more about getting the visuals down. So I write them in both ways, but getting to where I'm at now, I will, if I'm writing for somebody else, I'll write my scripts to how they want it to be written, right? For Drew, it was more loose. But for if I wrote another script for Rick, which I'm working on another one for Rick right now, it's going to be a lot more detailed. It's going to have those camera angles and those panel layouts that I do for him and for the ones I do for myself, because I know that's how he likes to work. But I'll tailor a script to whatever the artist likes, because I know there's some artists out there who want you to say, let's say there's a fight scene happening. You're here's a fight scene on 2 pages. Make it, make it look good, and just that's it. Not describe out how the fight scene goes or whatever. And, it matters. For me, it's it depends on who's going to be drawing the script is how I'm going to write it.
No, that's super important to be, to be so receptive to your artists and your artists' needs and how they like to do things. I think that's probably a big thing they look for in a writer to collaborate with. That's what makes it a collaboration. Yeah.
Exactly. It's more fun that way too, because then I feel I don't know. Even with the ones I wrote for Rick, which are super detailed, I even told him, I was like, hey man, you're the artist. You are basically the cinematographer of this story. So if you think something needs to visually change, I trust you to do it. That's why I'm having you work with something. So I trust you to make that change. I'm just writing the script. You can make the visual changes however you want.
Mm-hmm. Now, in dealing with the artistic teams and so forth that you have on this, how did you? Excuse me. Let me just rephrase this. All right, 3, 2, 1. So, how much freedom did you give your creative teams to play with the mythology of this family and this story?
So initially for this first book, I gave a lot of freedom out because what I did to create this world is I started by creating a family and then creating a family tree. So I created about 250, 260 different characters with birthdays and death dates throughout history, dating from like about 100 years in the future to about 1450, somewhere in that range. And what I did is the writers, I started with the writers first because this book is not comprised of teams that came to me with stories. It's comprised of me making teams to make stories. So I started with writers, and the pitch for the writers was, hey, I have this idea for a horror anthology doing around a family, like I've mentioned before. I want to have different writers tell their versions of, or tell their stories with their voice somewhere on this timeline, dealing with characters of this family. So the first question is what time period do you want to write in, like, or what event do you want to write around? And they would pick like, oh, I want to write about World War I, or I want to write about the fall of Bristol, or I want to write about the coming to America in the 1600s, just giving a time frame, or I want to write about 1990 in Detroit, something like that. And I say, okay, this is your time frame. I will find characters in the family that match kind of the story you want to tell, and I gave them kind of a brief description of who the character was, a little bit about them. But what I did for the first book, because the first book is all establishing, right? I told them, okay, these characters are not really actually established yet, so you have the freedom to kind of establish these characters' personas and their characteristics. So have at it. And if you write anything that doesn't fit with the mentality of what this book, what this character is going to be, we'll change it. If you have questions, we can work on it. And so what ended up happening is I gave the writers their, the timelines. They gave me their pitch of what they wanted to write about, and I either, approved it or modified it with them. And I gave them the characters, and they would write it. And then most of the time, most of the writers would be messaging me on Facebook back and forth. Hey, I have this idea for this character. Does that work for you? And we'd kind of talk it out, and I would kind of help on the high level with, yes, it works, no, it doesn't. And then, but most of the freedom, most of the work was all on the writers. I gave them pretty much carte blanche freedom to kind of tell their story in their voice, because I didn't want to hinder them. And I also told them originally, you have 4 to 8 pages, but a lot of the stories end up being longer than 8 pages. So I was like, I didn't want to inhibit them, because a good point is that the Black Hand story, and with the World War I story, Travis came to me. He's like, I can't tell the story in 8 pages. And I'm like, well, what do you need? And he goes, I need at least 16. And I was like, well, do it. Let's write. We can break it in half. Write it out. I don't want to have to cut the story short. If the story needs that breathing room, we have room in the multiple books we're doing to do that with, because we're going to have some stories that are shorter, some stories that are longer. I want to make sure the stories that get told in the best way possible. And then once the scripts came back to me, it was then my job as the, overarching person on this book to say, okay, I want each story not only to reflect a different viewpoint from the writer and from the time period, and because, when you turn stories that go throughout time, people feel differently, people are differently than they are today than they were 100 years ago. And I want that to reflect in the stories, which is why it was important for me to have people from different backgrounds all over the world. So with that, I was like, I also don't want the stories to all look the same. I don't want them to have the same art or same style of art. So I found artists that fit the stories that were being told, not necessarily fit the time period they're being told in, but fit the tone of the story. So we have, art from people who draw in very, very standard comic book format to people who draw in a more like Frank Miller type black and white negative space, all the way to people who draw in super detailed grayscale with paint and these beautiful details and stuff. So we have a very eclectic view of how things look, but each artist is tailored to how the story is supposed to be told and how the story comes across. And that was very much on purpose. And then for the artists that didn't color their own work, I would then find a colorist that would color into their style the best way that would help tell that story and give it this overarching feel that at the end of the day, you're reading one book about one family, but each story has its own feel because of the team that was created for it, as well as the time period and the story type that it is.
And this is like 20-something teams. Like this is a lot. How long did it take you to put this together? I mean, even just the effort of sorting through submissions and teaming the right artists with the right people. This sounds like an all-encompassing endeavor.
So this first book, which has 10 stories in it, 9 stories, and then the 10th bigger story that brings it in together, has taken about 2.5 years to get to this point. And that's with me. I work on several stories. Like I wrote 2 of the stories. I ink one of the stories. I'm coloring 2 of the stories. So I've done various work on different. I actually didn't draw a story of this book, which is interesting because the one that I did draw, we ended up pulling out of this book and moving to book 2 just because it didn't fit. It didn't fit the theme of book 1 very well. But I do various things. But yeah, it took about 2 years to get getting all the scripts in and then figuring out what stories we wanted to put into book 1. Once we had that, we started getting artists to draw this, to draw these stories, working out, what they wanted to be paid. Because one thing I did with this book is I made sure everybody got paid before the book went to Kickstarter. I want to make sure all the writers and artists got paid prior to the book going to Kickstarter. That way, they weren't waiting on their money for the Kickstarter to fund or not. So all the risk was on me, not on them. That was pretty important to me to do.
That is a huge vote of confidence. That is like a big thing. And when I hear about that, that really makes me want to buy it. I feel like you are putting your personal risk out there.
Yeah, it took some convincing of the wife to do that because it wasn't cheap, right? Paying off, all together right now, all together, I think I have like 50 different people that I've hired for these 4 books. And by hired meaning I'm paying them, but it's all. I mean, they're not like just hired guns. Everything is very collaborative with me, with the writers, with the artists. I've been very lucky getting creators that are super collaborative and have great ideas. I feel blessed with the quality of work these people have turned into me. But getting my wife to sign off on this and hey, I'm going to pay everybody up front. At first she was like, "We have 5 kids. You're going to do what now?"
Hey, look, I was like, why don't you just train your kids to draw now, and then just have them do the damn book in 10 years, all right?
You know what? I'm trying to. My 8-year-old draws really well, and she paints really well, so she's on her way. And my 11-year-old, he is, actually, no, my almost 13-year-old, I got that wrong. He's very creative, so he writes some really insane stories. Now they're not like horror stories. They're just like insane juvenile comedy stories, and they make me laugh.
So in other words,
he wrote one called Slug City, which was pretty funny. About a slug in the city taking over and destroying the city. It was a giant slug.
So in other words, he really is following in your footsteps.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, more so for this, I wanted to make sure that for me, I felt that if I put my foot in the game of put my, not only all the time that I put in this book, because I basically am up till 1 o'clock in the morning every night working on this book or working on aspects of this book in the background. Like last night I was up until 1 working. I got a new story idea last night and I was up until 11 o'clock with my co-editor Casey hashing out ideas for it. And then up until 1 writing out plot points for it because it's going to be a bigger story in the Eynes world. But, stuff like that, or working on recording podcasts with people or sitting on interviews, or I have my own podcast, and on that podcast we're actually doing special episodes for each story where we do like this big production, not really big production. We have like theme songs for each story. We have a narrator reading about what the story is and who worked on it, and then the little interviews with all the creators, which that's been a nightmare to correlate, by the way.
That's so ambitious. You are so ambitious.
Well, go big or go home, right?
I just want to know, do you have Huey Boll on track to direct the film of this?
Not yet, but working on that. No, I'm kidding. That'd be great, though. How awesome would that be? But we do have in the works a radio play. So I had one of the writers actually writes radio plays, and he turned his comic script into a 12-minute radio play that we're going to produce here in a couple months. Just for fun.
That's cool. You're really going all in with the full
idea
of this. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But back to just finish the thought on the funding, the pain of the funding of my wife is once we got into working on this and once she saw like the blueprint of what I was working on and we talked to Ad about paying everybody up front. She was all on board and we figured out the budget and how to do it. And she's been fully supportive of that and totally agrees with why I wanted to do that versus having them being paid out of the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad she gets it. That's really, really important. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, she's working on the book too. She's actually going to hand letter the ones actually. I take it back. I am drawing a story for this book. The overarching story that connects everything. Mm-hmm. I'm writing and drawing, and she's going to hand letter it because she does really beautiful calligraphy. Oh. So she's going to hand letter that story for us, which is going to be awesome.
Oh, how nice! That's great.
Yeah.
So, how did you go out finding your collaborators? How did you find those teams?
Different ways. So the writers, I actually a little over 2 years ago, I put a post on a Facebook group called I believe it was called Connecting Comic Book Writers and Artists. Very, very straightforward. I put a post out with kind of a very basic pitch of what I was doing, and I said, I want to hire writers on to write in this world with me, and I ended it with everybody gets paid, which was I think why I got so many responses, but we'll never know. Hopefully it was because it was a great idea, not because I said I'll pay you, but we'll see. Uh, with that, I got like over 200 responses like in a week. And I had a bunch of people messaging me and emailing me samples and like scripts they'd done before, sending me pitch ideas. So I spent about the next month reading through these comics they'd sent me or these scripts they would send me and kind of whittled that down to about 25. So from about 200, 250 down to about 25 people that I wanted to work with. And I based it on three things, really. One, can they write? Which was obviously the most important one. Can they write? And do I enjoy the way that what the stories are telling? Two, can I get along with this person? Do I feel like I can work with this person? Because I figure if I'm going to bring somebody on to work on a book that I'm super passionate about, I should be able to work with them and get along with them, and not think they're a total jerk, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the most important.
Sometimes, yeah. And then three is are they reliable, right? Can I see a track record of them actually, getting stuff done? Because I don't want to be waiting on people because I'm a go kind of guy. I overdo myself all the time. And not that I'm saying I want people to do that with me, but I want to be able to say, hey, if you tell me you're going to have me a script in a month and a half, I don't want to be waiting 7 months for it, that kind of thing. And I did bring on a couple people who were brand new. I brought on a guy, Shane, out of the UK, he wrote I actually taught him how to write scripts. Cause he's like, I want to write comic books, but I don't know how to do it. And I was like, well, send me your idea. He sent me a pitch and a little synopsis. And I was like, all right, I like this. Let's see what we can do. So I kind of gave him a little quick one-on-one of here's how to format a script. Go for it. And he sent a script. Now it was his very first one. So in the editing process, we had to like edit some things around, but it came out fantastic for a very first script. And that story will actually be in book 3. So, I mean, it ended up being good enough for me to say, let's run with it. But, I took people from, people who are brand new to people who had dozens and dozens of comic books printed in their name in the indie world. So it really wasn't about what they'd done before. It was about the quality of their work. Do I like it? Can I get along with them? That kind of thing. And that was for the writers. Now, the artist was a totally different way. Now, to cap off the writers real quick, I did have a couple writers come to me afterwards because people were started hearing it. People were talking about the project over the last 2 years. The writers were talking about what they were working on, and I had some other writers message me or people on the book like, hey, my buddy also writes scripts. He's a really cool guy. Do you mind talking to him about this, or do you have more room? And I was like, yeah, I'm more than happy to bring people on. Because my thought process originally was that I was going to do one book, 250 pages, and then that was going to be it. But then over time, I decided to break it up into 4 books to ultimately tell a better story than versus one giant book. And my thought process of hiring more writers than I needed was, well, if I hire more writers than I need, people are probably going to drop out because of life, because something happens. So if I have a buffer of like 5 writers or so, then I'll end up having the 20 in the end that I want. Now I end up with like 30 some writers at the end, which is good because I have more stories to tell than I would have in just the one book. But eventually I was like, oh, people will drop out or people won't send scripts in, and it's just a fact of life. I know how even best intentions go awry sometimes. Mm-hmm. But now I have about 32 writers that have given me scripts that are all fantastic. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn on this book, but these writers have given me some amazing pieces of work. And but then it came to the task of finding artists. Now, originally, I was going to draw this whole book myself. I had this grand ambition of, I'll just do all of the art. I can draw in various different styles. That'll work. And then I started drawing the first one. And then I realized I have 5 kids. I have a full-time job. And I have a wife that I like to see. I will never finish this book. There's no way this will ever get done in a timely manner. So after much self-reflection and my co-host on my podcast, who's also my wife's uncle, constantly telling me, you should hire artists. You're never going to finish this. I was like, okay, let's bring in some of the teams, because then I decided this becomes more about telling the best possible stories versus me flexing my muscles as an artist, which is, again, unless I quit my day job, I'm not going to have time to do that. And I had to come to grips with that. So the first person I contacted was Rick Bugby, because I've worked with Rick in the past. He's a friend of mine. We've done a couple stories in some small press stuff for the last like 10, 15 years. And he was the first one I reached out to. I was like, Rick, I love your style. I have a script for this new thing I'm working on. Are you interested? And he was like, hell yeah, I'm interested. So I sent it over to him, and he worked on the story called Camelot's Gift that I wrote, which is basically a 6-page story with no dialogue that ends in a very messed up way. But Rick knocked it out the park, and it came out beautiful. And then I ended up looking through some forums, looking through some Facebook pages. And I was like, I don't want to just make a post like I did for the writers, because that's going to be insane. Well, I want to go out and I want to like look for people and say, okay, I like this guy's art. I like how this guy lays things out. Let me reach out to him or her and see if I can afford them and if they're interested. So that's what I did. I kind of like spent like 4 or 5 months kind of just watching these forums where people post their art and on Twitter and stuff like that. And then when I saw something that grabbed my eye and I was like, oh, this guy's amazing, I would message him and say, hey, I have this book I'm working on. This is what I'm doing. What do you charge? Can I afford you? And for the most part, most people that I messaged were in a price range that I could afford, fortunately, and I was able to pay them what they were asking for. I had a couple of people who were outside of what I could afford, and I had one or two that was like, well, I like your concept. I'll drop my rates down to what you can afford for this 4-page story or whatever, which was, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So did that, worked for about a year to get this first book done, and make sure I staggered them so I could pay them properly, so I had to break myself, and then I had to get them colored. So I did the same process for coloring, where I just would watch Twitter and groups for colorists who would post their stuff and say, oh, this person colors amazingly well. I bet that would work really well in this story. Reach out to them, find what their rates were. I did recently, a couple months ago, just posted Twitter saying, hey, I need a colorist because I had a colorist drop out. She was doing great work, but then she just disappeared, and I didn't hear from her for 9 months. And I was like, well, I need to get this done, so I got to hire somebody new, which was unfortunate because her colors were really good. I liked them a lot, but you got to do what you got to do to get the book out. So it was kind of the process of just finding people that I thought could match up with the art and the stories really well, and bringing them on board and making sure I could afford them with what they wanted.
Tell me, you said that you have a very sort of widespread international cast of creators. Where are some of these people from?
So in the first book alone, we have people from, and let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, from all over the U.S., Canada, the U.S., or the U.K., Argentina, the Philippines, Nigeria. We have a writer from Nigeria. I think that wrapped up the first book. Yeah. So all the way from, 4 continents, pretty much. Which was pretty cool. And yes, I did ask the guy from Nigeria. I was like, are you a Nigerian prince trying to get money out of me? And he said, well, I can pretend that way if you want to, but his story came out really well. But yeah, we have all over the world. And then the next book has all over the world too. And that was mostly because I had these people submit stories, and their viewpoints are so different than somebody who, just from the US, but they still tell these great stories, especially having stories from writers in the UK write stories about these characters in the UK turned out to be really well, because the story The Crossed Path, The Crossed Paths by Joseph S. Pell, it's based in 1645 in Bristol, and his fiance happens to be from Bristol. So for all the dialogue for the character that was from that area, that time period, she helped put it into authentic Bristolese, I guess they called it, which made it really cool because, even though he's from England, Bristol has its own dialect that it uses. Oh, right. So it has this whole character talks in a certain way. That's not much off from regular, UK English, but it's off enough that if somebody from Bristol was reading it, knowing that it takes place in Bristol, they would go, oh, that's not right, But she was able to, he had her go through and quote unquote translate it to be in Bristolese, which is really cool. And it gave this book this extra, I don't want to say authenticity, but this extra level of thing with it to say, oh, this is more accurate because it had this into it. And having, artists from, what I have found from artists from other parts of the world, we have a colorist in Spain too. I forgot that. We have someone in Spain as well. Having artists drawing the stories from Argentina and the Philippines and stuff like that, is they attack and approach certain panel types differently than American artists do. So while they can definitely mimic an American artist or American comics, I very much told them not to do that when they were drawing the story. I said, draw it in your style. I hired you because I want your style. I don't want you to mimic somebody else's style. So we see these different, I don't know, for me, it's these different way they do paneling, and a lot of artists will break panel walls, but it just gets different when they have this different aspect of they learn to draw. The ways they do things are different than ways we do things, even if it ends up being the same end result. So you see little nuances in there, which I love seeing that kind of stuff, which is me wanting the stories to look a little differently. That was important to me, to make sure it has a little bit of aesthetic difference to it, that if you really pay attention, you'll catch on to, but if you don't, then you won't.
See, but that's exactly what you want. You want that authenticity,
Yeah.
and that's the whole point of diversity, is that you want that sort of, you want these different styles, and you want to, you want to feel sort of what things are like in other parts of the world, or other points of view, and I think
Yeah.
that's important, especially if you're
Yeah.
telling this wide-ranging, far-reaching story.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in that. Just because somebody's the same age as me, in which part of the world, does not mean they're going to have the same viewpoints as me. Even if we have the same, like, political ideologies, they may see things totally differently than me. And I think those voices are very valid to be heard. And it wasn't like I went out trying to say, oh, I want to bring people from this book who are X, Y, and Z and fit a quota. It was, I want to bring people in the book that have. I don't want to bring 5 people on from the same place have the same voice. That was more of my mentality about how I've been bringing people on.
So tell me, who are some of the creators on this book that you think are going to blow up? Who should we be looking out for?
So I'll go back to Rick Bugby, because I think Rick is the unsung hero of like small indie books, because he is such a fantastic artist and he is such a detailed artist that I don't know why he hasn't done more. I think mostly it's because he did stuff a long time ago and it didn't work out. It's like getting a name, and so he just stopped, and he came back to it years later. But I don't know. He's fantastic, and if you have not seen his work, look him up on Instagram. He's not on Twitter, but he's on Instagram, and I think his handle is Bugby Art, so Bugbee Art. But he'll also be all over the book, and he's going to be in book 2. He's actually going to be he's drawing another story for us, so I'm keeping him very busy because I like his work that much. But also in this book, we have Clayton Hollyfield, who is drawing a story called The Wanderer, which, if you get the book and you read this story, understand that The Wanderer is supposed to make you feel gross inside when you finish it. It is a very disgusting story. I don't mean disgusting like it's a gory story. I mean, it gets you that pit of your stomach, oh my God, why would this be in print type of story. But it sets up this character and it sets up this world in a way that lets you know, hey, this kind of really bad stuff can happen. And Clayton did such a great job portraying that in the artwork without being grotesque, And he does a comic book called San Wim, and I've been a big fan of his since I first met him a couple of years ago at Rose City Comic Con down in Portland. And I think that if he keeps getting more work outside of his solo series, doing other stuff, I think he'll be one to watch out for too.
I wanted to ask, I had heard you mention on Comic Book Bears, you had mentioned the story that you ran an online comic shop with your sister?
I did, yeah, for like 7 years.
Is your sister into comics?
My sister loves comic books, but she actually hates reading comic books because she doesn't understand how panels work very well. Like, she does, but she's a big book reader. She'll read like a Stephen King novel a day and a half or a day, right? She'll read novels. She's reading all the time. But when it comes to comics, her and I grew up on comic books with my dad because my dad was really big into comic books. She would read them, but she'd always be like, I don't know where to go with the panels. And I would explain to her, she's like, well, I get that, but when I'm reading it, my eyes just get confused with the pictures. I get lost in the pictures and I forget to read the story. And then I'm like, what did I just do? So she is into comic books. She loves comic book everything. She doesn't actually read them very often just because she gets visually confused by the panels, which I get. My wife's the same way. My wife loves comics. Well, she loves comics, but she doesn't read them as much as I do because she's like, well, sometimes I get lost in where to go next. I'm like, well, I mean, my wife's pretty new to it. She's only been reading comics for the last like 5 years or so since I forced her into it, But she loves pop culture. She's more into like the movies and the horror and the novels. She'll read a novelization of any comic book any day, but she's not very much big into reading actual floppy. She'll read my stuff because I'll make her, though.
It's like, I admit that, like, I've never actually read Crisis on Infinite Earth because I read the paperback version of it for like a quarter. So it's like, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. Well, that's how I read Kingdom Come. Uh-huh. I picked up their hardback novelization by Elliot S. Maggin from Half Price Books one day, and I read that. I was like, oh, this is really good. And then I was like, oh, this is an actual comic book too? Like, oh, that's good too.
It's interesting going back to like what we were saying about literacy and learning to read, because comic book literacy is a different beast. It is very, very much learning to train your eyes and to sort of like being able to follow things naturally and be able to pick up on things that the artist is doing that may not necessarily be in the dialogue and all of that stuff. There really is there's a different form of literacy to it. I mean, obviously, I think Scott McCloud has explained that a million times.
Definitely. Yeah, it's it's fun though because for me with comic books, reading a comic book, not only do you, you can blow through a comic book real quick, right? If you just read the words and ignore the art, you can blow through a regular comic book page in like a book in like 10 minutes or less.
Yeah.
But if you slow down and take time to like bring in the panel, those pictures are very much a part of the writing. You read the pictures like you read the script, like you read the dialogue and the narration, and those pictures at each panel, you read that and you just get so much more because a good artist is going to put so much into each panel that you're going to get a lot more story by taking the time to absorb the panels as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It's half the storytelling is the art, obviously.
Yeah, agreed.
So tell me about your horror influences and sort of what you're into that might have inspired the Eynes Anthology.
That's a great question, and I have a very weird answer for that. And I don't know if it's going to answer your question, but I'm not a big horror buff, to be honest. Like, I like horror stuff, I like scary stuff, but see, when I think of horror, I think of like things that really, really scare me. But like movies and fiction doesn't scare me. And the last movie to actually, I don't know if it scared me or if it just made me feel uneasy, was the movie Hostel. Like that movie's the reason why I won't stay in a hostel in anywhere in Europe. I just do it because that movie got me viscerally. I'm like, nope, I can't do it. But for the most part, like I'll watch horror films. I watch a lot of supernatural stuff, a lot of like stuff that deals with like monsters and demons and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of the show Supernatural too. Mm-hmm. But I watch a lot of that stuff. But like my horror influences, like I grew up on Clive Barker. And I love the old Fright Night comic books he did. I grew up reading, Epic Illustrated, and like I know it's not horror, but for me, horror is like things that make you go, oh my god, and like can be scary with monsters. And Judge Dredd to me kind of has that aspect to it, especially the old '80s ones. Mm-hmm. And I loved reading those old Eagle comics back then. But like, we didn't watch a lot of horror in my house because my mom wouldn't let us. She wouldn't let us watch like the old Child's Play movies. But I think Child's Play is kind of dorky. But we wouldn't watch those. So like we'd have to like sneak in with my dad to watch like Nightmare on Elm Street or the Jason movies, which, to be fair, those are pretty corny unless you watch. Like the first one's good, but they're pretty corny after that. And they're pretty funny. Although Jason X, I think, is a really great space comedy.
See, but that's the beauty. I mean, when you think about a lot of the horror stuff we watch as a kid is corny, but you have to watch it kind of like at that point in your life where you're impressionable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But like, I mean, as far as my influence for horror goes, I just always drew gross horror things. Like my go-to, even now, when I want to draw something, is draw something with horns, draw something with their head falling off, draw something with an arm coming out of their head, draw some weird surrealistic craziness. Like that's just my go-to, and that's just, I intake so much different types of media. It's not just, I don't just watch one type of thing. I watch a lot of comedy because I like to laugh, but in some respects, I think horror is like just one thin line away from comedy, because when you get scared, you have the same reaction when something's funny. Is like, in a movie, a jump scare makes you laugh. It doesn't make you go, oh my god, and start crying. You laugh because of it. It's a very thin line there. And I find myself, and it's funny because my wife actually hates horror, or she did for a long time. She could not stand anything scary at all. But about 5 years ago, there was this shift with the horror movies with us, where all of a sudden at Christmas time, she wanted to watch nothing but horror films on Netflix. So we now have a tradition in our family that every December and January, we're watching horror films. Often we just pick random films off Netflix that are in the horror or thriller categories and watch them. And my wife, it's now her thing, and she loves it. And now my 5-year-old son, his favorite movie is Scream right now, because he watched Scream 4, and it's the greatest thing ever to him. So we had to buy him a Ghostface mask. We bought him a little toy knife because he wants to be Ghostface. And he's like, I want to put on Scream. I want to see him get stabbed again. I'm like, it's fake. He's like, yeah, it's fake, but they're getting stabbed. I'm like, am I a good parent letting my kid watch this? I don't know, but
yeah, no, but you're right. Both comedy and horror are both sort of based around involuntary reactions. Like
exactly.
you know that you've gotten someone when you can make them laugh or squirm or whatever. Like they're both based around that idea of our basest instincts or our basest sort of subconscious reactions to things.
Yeah, exactly. And he's now trying to watch. He types in. He can't, obviously he's 5. He can't read yet, but he knows his letters. So he goes to Netflix. He types in SC for Scream, which brings up Scream. And because it's Netflix, it brings up all the other like horror films that are out there. And so he tries to always pick the scariest looking picture to watch. And I'm like, you can't watch these movies without mom and dad because I don't know what they are, and I'm not letting my 5-year-old watch R-rated horror films. I mean, Scream 4 is PG-13, so it's a little better. But I mean, which is already, he tries to make this one, and it has like this creepy kid doll face on it, and I'm like, no, you're not watching that. That does not look good. But now he's trying to watch my wife ended up buying all 4 Scream movies on Vudu for him to watch, and he just loves them right now. I'm like, all right, whatever. My kid's a Scream fan. Okay, cool.
Pretty soon, there's a whole TV series for him too. Yeah.
I know. I tried to get him to watch it. He's right now. He's all about the movies right now. Well, especially Scream 4. I don't know. Scream 4 is his favorite. He loves that one the most. He watches the other ones, but he'll watch Scream 4 every day if I let him.
He's a big Jennifer Love Hewitt fan.
Right.
Wait, no, was she in those?
No. It's Nev Campbell.
They're both Party Five people.
I've watched them so many times in the last 2 weeks. I can tell you all the actors and all 4 of them if you want me to.
So which one was the one where they were on the set of the movie that was being made of Scream? Was that?
That was Scream 2. It was Scream 2. Yeah. That's the one. That's the one with Patrick Dempsey in it as Detective Kincaid.
Wait, so is Scream 4 the one with like the house party at like the barn or something?
So yeah, Scream 4 has the house party at the barn, and it's actually, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, it's actually Sydney's niece that's the killer.
Oh.
It has Hayden Panettiere in it and Emma Roberts. Again, I know way too much about Scream movies now because my son watches them all the time.
That's adorable. That's so funny.
And because of that, my wife and I, one of the things I do with movies is as I'm watching them, I have my phone. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. I'll look stuff up, look up actors, and find out about them as I'm watching. So I've been doing that with Scream with my kid because we've been watching them every day.
Right. Well, you're not missing anything.
Right.
And then pretty soon, he'll be into all the Kevin Williamson stuff or whatever, and he'll have been watching Dawson's Creek. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
So let's wrap this up. Tell everybody where we can find the Kickstarter, where we can find more information about this.
Sure. So you can just go to Kickstarter, type in Eynes, EYNES, it'll come right up. Or you can go to Eynes Anthology, EYNES, anthology.com/Kickstarter, and it'll take you right to the page. You can find it on Twitter or Instagram, just at Eynes Anthology. You can find me anywhere at Y2CL, so just Y, number 2, and CL. That's my handle on all social media. I have a website, y2cl.net. That's I post. I don't post a lot there right now because I've been so ingrained in this book, but usually I post artwork and some podcast stuff and some articles I write will be posted up there. If you want to hear me talk more, I have a podcast called Spoiler Country. You can find it at scpod.net. Cool. And yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for spending time with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I do have a question for you real quick, though.
Yeah, go to it.
So I saw, and if I'm wrong on this, just go ahead and say I'm wrong, but I saw that you play drums.
Yes. Yeah, I've been in a band. I've been playing in a band for the past... So I've been playing drums since I was 8 years old. I've been playing drums forever and ever. And I teach
Nice.
I teach drums, and I do all these things. And so, yeah, I've been in my one band, Demon Familiar, for about, over 10 years now. And just last night, I'm now, in a second band. Things are always
Nice.
coming up. Yeah, so I'm always, filling in. I'm always filling in with different bands and doing different things. And I love it, because drums...
That's awesome. Yeah, I started playing drums when I was 6, and I played in a couple of bands in high school and college, and then I have a drum set, but it's currently packed away because we're in the process of moving. But yeah, I saw that and I was like, ooh, a double drummer. I love drums.
There you go. We're twinsies. Just
Yay, twinsies!
My buddy John Westhoff from Kingbone Press, he's another comic, comic entrepreneur. He also plays drums, So
nice.
It's cool.
It's kind of funny how the cross section of people who write and draw comics and play music. A lot of artists and stuff will also play guitar or play bass or something, or drummers as well. It's pretty cool how those two things cross over.
Right, I love hearing about that stuff. I love that. I love oh gosh, I forget who I was talking. Whenever he talks to any of those Black Mask guys, they're always punk rock in some way.
Right.
I love that stuff. I love hearing about other people's musical passions. I think that's great because it's true. If you're, it's very overlapping. People are rarely just one thing. People are rarely just in one thing. They just, it's you have these instincts and you want to. Also, just like you're saying about wanting to do radio plays and wanting to do these things, you find a need. You find well, this would be awesome if it tied in with that. So maybe I'll just learn to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I'll do audio editing, so I can do podcasting. Because I want to talk more.
Right, exactly. I was a recording engineer, and I was like, I could do a podcast. I do it all myself.
Right. Right. Exactly. I did some. I was never a recording engineer, but I did run soundboards at shows and run soundboards keyboards in our recording studio a couple times,
Yeah.
which was a lot of fun. And which gave me the idea is, I could probably mix some basic audio with no music,
Right.
which is, it's funny when we talk about passion and stuff. Like this book actually has a soundtrack of songs that go with each story too. Because why not? Why wouldn't it, right?
And I love that too. I love whenever anybody ties in, I love it whenever any artist or whatever has like a playlist or something, like songs they're listening to as they're doing things, or songs that, go along with the characters. Like, I love that stuff.
Yeah. Well, this soundtrack is actually myself and another writer, Joey Edsall, and then a couple other local bands here that have songs specifically for these stories.
Oh, that's so cool. Yay.
Yeah.
Will you make
so
the final of it? Will that be the next Kickstarter?
It'll be in. So I haven't announced it officially on the campaign itself yet. But once we cross like 75%, I'll officially announce it on the page. So anybody hearing this gets it early on that, I guess. But there's a 10-track soundtrack that'll be available digitally to everybody at the end. And then if one of the stretch goals will be to actually press the soundtrack and release an actual physical copy of it.
See, that's super cool. Something else to look forward to.
Right. I have so many ideas. It's not even funny with this silly book.
Well, I'm glad, and I hope that they continue for a long time. I hope we get to see much more of this book and these characters.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much.
Take it easy.